Hello. I hope you had a great week since our last episode together. Today we are going to talk about creating a daily spiritual practice and why this is important for your spiritual journey. I'm your host, Marta, and this is Spiritcraft, the podcast to nurture your soul and unleash the magic within. When we think about having a daily spiritual practice, we may feel overwhelmed by all the possibilities and how involved it should be. Most of us feel like we don't have enough hours in the day already, so the thought of adding something else to our schedule might send you running for the hills. But don't worry, after today you will have tools and tips to help you create a daily spiritual practice to suit your needs, no matter how much time you have. What is a daily spiritual practice? As the name indicates, a daily spiritual practice is a set of activities or rituals performed regularly or daily to cultivate spiritual growth and inner peace. It can include meditation, prayer, journaling, and it's essentially tailored to individual beliefs and lifestyles. This practice helps foster a deeper connection with yourself and the divine, and it promotes overall well-being and mindfulness. Of course, we're all different, so the key here is to tailor your spiritual practice to your needs and your lifestyle. You may wish to read sacred texts or maybe perform rituals based on the moon's phases or both. Essentially, there is no right or wrong way. There are many elements to a spiritual practice, and some of those can be things like prayer, sacred texts, spiritual communion, chanting, prayer beads, meditation, charity, deity worship, ancestral worship, singing, self-reflection. You can practice arts, journaling, physical movement, connection to nature, you name it. I mean, anything you can think of can be part of your spiritual practice. And just to go into a little bit with some of them, most of us understand spiritual practices as the same as practicing a religion, and it doesn't really need to be the same. You cannot have religion without spirituality, but you can have spirituality without religion. For example, when I say prayer, we may think about Christian prayer or any other kind of prayers, but it can also be just talking to your higher self or to any other deity that you might wish to worship or to source and the universe. And when we are, for example, practicing affirmations, it is a form of praying. Prayer beads, for example, you can have something like the rosary, or you can also have like mala beads, and it's just a way of keeping track of how many times whatever prayer you need to be repeating, basically. You can go over it a number of times, and it will depend on the type of tradition that you follow. A lot of us know things like pilgrimage, and obviously there are very famous pilgrimage journeys out there, but again, this can be tied to one of the major religions, but it can also be a journey of self-discovery that you do, kind of like Eat, Pray, Love, if you like. Practicing arts is something that a lot of people don't think that it can be part of a spiritual practice, but if you think about it, prayers are some form of poems, hymns, music, songs that you might have, for example, in places of worship. So there are many different ways where you can incorporate arts into your own spiritual practice. When I talk about physical movement or exercise, this can be something as yoga, and now it's becoming quite popular on social media to talk about things like somatic yoga. But it doesn't have to be this kind of movement. It can also be just dancing and following some rhythm. It can be movement to feel different parts of your body. It can also be exercise in the gym or out in nature or whatever. What I'm trying to say with all of this is there are many ways to practice your own spirituality, and I don't want you to feel like you have to do it in a certain way, because we are all different, as I always say, and so we will see the world in different ways, and we practice and do things in different ways. So for someone, chanting might feel very weird and awkward, but then, for example, singing might be exactly what they need. And they might feel not even that they have to join a church or something and sing for the church, but it might just be singing to themselves when they are gardening or singing as a way of connecting with the ancestors. There are many ways where we can use all of these elements to incorporate them into our own spiritual practices. Having a regular spiritual practice is actually full of benefits, things like an enhanced spiritual growth and understanding. You can feel much more peaceful and calm. You can live more meaningful lives. You're going to feel connected to something bigger than yourself, be it community, be it deities, be it spirit, or whatever, nature, the world. You might also find yourself with better physical health, and you might have improved relationships. For example, there's been some studies that have proved that having a regular spiritual practice can help with reducing stress, anxiety, and depression. And I think this comes back to this whole meditation and mindfulness and understanding ourselves and maybe even feeling like we are part of something bigger. It's not so much as we put ourselves into the hands of something bigger than us, but we learn to accept the things that happen to us, and we learn how we can deal with events in our lives. So obviously we feel a bit more in control of the things that we can control, and that will reduce that sense of stress that we might feel at times. We also tend to learn breathing techniques, relaxation, meditation, sitting in stillness, and being alone with our own thoughts and with different prayers that might actually be used to physically slow down our breathing or our heart rate. And so all of these essentially is going to help us remain much more centered and balanced. We can also get a restored sense of purpose. So a lot of people feel lost in their lives and feel like there's no meaning to anything, what's the point, and stuff like that. And I think it's very important when we become connected to something else, to either our community, to the world around us, or to something, call it God, call it spirit, call it source, call it whatever you want to call it. It gives us that sense of purpose, like the things that we do are part of something bigger. And it also helps us understand that we're all connected and we're all part of the same being or the same stuff, to do it in a very technical way. And that allows us as well to be much more appreciative of the environment around us, basically. And we start thinking much more clearly and much more positively about ourselves, about the world around us. So there's a lot of benefits like that, as you can see, and there will be more benefits that they are particular to you. So they might make you feel more connected to your family, or they might make you feel like you sleep better because you might be feeling like you're putting all your problems into the bigger consciousness, or whatever you might call it. And so I think having a spiritual practice that we actually do regularly, not something that we do once in a while and then we forget about it, is quite important, because without it, we might not even realize all of the things that might not be working out exactly the way they need to. But once you start practicing regularly, then you start feeling all these small changes at first, to the point that it becomes a part of your daily life. And then if you don't have time to practice it, you will really notice the difference. I don't know if that makes sense. As with many of the things that we've been talking about in this podcast so far, one of the first things that you might want to do when creating your own spiritual practice is set your intention. So of course, you're going to have to identify your purpose, why you want to establish this daily spiritual practice. And it could be for peace, it could be for clarity, it could be to feel connected to something else, for personal growth. Obviously, your purpose is going to be very, very personal to you. And it will help as well if you write down these goals, if you like. Write down what you hope to achieve through this type of practice. This intention, once you set it, it will guide your practice and keep you motivated. After that, of course, choose your practices. Maybe you want to practice meditation, so you want to spend a few minutes each day in silent or guided meditation, so you can calm your mind and maybe connect with your inner self. Or maybe you want to engage in daily prayers to communicate with the divine or to express gratitude. Of course, Journaling is a great way to reflect on your thoughts, on your feelings, your experiences. Maybe you want to read sacred texts or spiritual books. Maybe you want to read some inspirational quotes that are going to help you gain that wisdom that you seek and maybe give you a different perspective in life and how you deal with things. And as I mentioned earlier, incorporating some sort of movement like yoga, tai chi, other mindful movements, that's going to help you connect body and spirit. But to be honest, any kind of physical exercise is going to help connect that body and spirit anyway, as long as you do it with purpose and intention. So the key here is to select activities that resonate with you. As we mentioned in one of the past episodes, the next thing will be to try to create a sacred space. Choosing a place in your home where you can practice without any interruptions, a bit of a quiet spot, that would be ideal, because that way, whenever you are in that space, you are signaling your mind, your body, your spirit that you are ready for this spiritual practice, and it's much easier to get into the feeling and the mood for that session. You can always add your personal touches, so just remember you can decorate the space with whatever inspires you. And I have that episode and blog post about creating sacred space and altar, so please have a look at that if you need some help. And then setting a routine, of course, consistency is important to build a habit. So ideally choose a time that fits your schedule and start with short sessions, and then gradually increase the time as you get more comfortable with your practice. So as with anything, when we practice at the same day, we are more likely to build that habit and make it almost like all automatic. But if you miss a day, don't be too hard on yourself. Just pick up where you left off, because even a few minutes each day can make a significant difference. So just be patient with yourself, because building a new habit takes time. As you are going through your spiritual practice, always reflect and adjust. You should evaluate how your practice is affecting you regularly, and if something isn't working, just don't be afraid to change it. Your spiritual practice should evolve as you do. So change that practice or that routine based on what feels right for you. I think maintaining consistency is one of the most common challenges that you will encounter when practicing spirituality with any frequency. If you do it too often, it might become overwhelming, and if you don't do it frequently enough, you might simply forget. And I know it because I have been there. There are many ways you can keep your practice consistent. If you're not sure if you'll be able to keep up with a strict routine, it's better to start off with a manageable frequency and then add on to it once you become used to your new habits. As I said earlier, even if it's a couple of minutes once a week. And a weekly routine should be easy to accomplish. For example, I try to spend time with my ancestors every Sunday, and at a minimum, I light some incense and change the water offering. If I have time or energy, then I make sure that I put in the effort, write in my ancestors' journal, do some prayers for them, light a candle, make offerings, and so on. And I choose Sundays for two main reasons. The first one is typical for Catholics to attend Mass on a Sunday, and my ancestors, being from Spain, would have been mostly Catholic. So even if I don't practice the same religion as them, I think it's a very important day to honor my ancestors. The second reason is that I remember meeting with my grandparents and maybe other family members on Sundays, and we will all eat together. Usually it would be paella. And so this makes sense to me. Sunday is like an important day for me to spend that time with my ancestors and my family. On Sundays, I also do a Reiki healing ritual where I do self-healing, and I also send Reiki to loved ones. And it feels almost like a weekly cleanse. So I'm closing the ending week and I'm getting ready for the new one. I also meditate in the evenings, usually when I'm in bed, but I don't do this every night. And again, it depends on how I feel, how much energy I have, or whether I need to relax or I need to focus on something. But if I don't meditate for 1 or 2 days, I don't beat myself up, because I know that it might be because I am too tired, that I just need to sleep, or I was way too busy. And so what I try to do is take deep breaths, and maybe I don't have enough time for a full meditation because I need to sleep, for example, for my rest, and that is okay. I can always meditate the next day. One of the easiest ways of getting used to a new habit is by practicing habit stacking. And basically, instead of trying to start a new habit from scratch, what you can do is add it onto something that you already do. For example, if you have a hot drink every morning, you could add a few minutes of deep breathing, of meditation, journaling to that habit. Maybe when you're brushing your teeth, you practice being present in the moment, or practice self-reflection or affirmations, although affirmations work best when stated out loud. But everything helps. Walking my dog at least twice every day is a great opportunity for me to allow me to be in contact with nature. I can observe the seasons changing, I can notice many life forms around me, and I can practice some exercise and deep breathing. Obviously when he lets me, because he is normally trained to chase a squirrel, so, we do what we can. Of course, lack of time can be an issue for many of us, but I'm going to tell you the same I used to tell some of my personal training clients. It's not about not having the time, it's about whether it's a priority. At the end of the day, we all make time for the things that matter to us. If your priority is ensuring that your family is looked after and taking care of your children, that is great. I'm not saying not to do it, of course. I mean, that is your priority, is your family. Instead, look at the things that will rob you of time, those things that actually don't do anything for us. Things like watching TV, scrolling on social media, watching the water boil, but you get the idea. If you are a carer, I completely understand that your time is already taken by looking after others. But let me ask you this, who's going to take care of them if you cannot do it? Your well-being should be the priority, or at least one of the top priorities. And looking after others can take a great toll on our mental health. That whole you cannot give from an empty bucket and all of that. I mean, challenges like the above are valid, don't get me wrong. What I want you to do is to change your mindset from I don't have time or I'm too busy to how can I make time for this? Every time you want to do something and you find yourself saying you don't have time for it, change that sentence into this is not a priority for me right now, and see if that makes you feel the same. I have to give a disclaimer here. I don't have a family to look after. But for example, when my relationship ended and I was on my own again, working in a gym and with a dog, I made it a priority to go to bed early so I could get up very early to walk my dog and have breakfast. When I say early, I mean I was in bed before 9 p.m. many nights, and I would get up at 4:30 in the morning. Walking my dog and having breakfast were both priorities for me, so I made time for them. And I still got around 6 to 7 hours of sleep every night. So yeah, sure, I wasn't up to date with all the stuff happening on TV or on social media in the evenings. I have been called a grandma, I have been called boring, but those weren't as important for me as ensuring that I had food ahead of physical work, getting the rest that I needed, and spending quality time with my dog every morning. Listen, I'm not telling you all of this to make you feel guilty, to tell you off, or to pretend that I am so great and disciplined or anything like that. So please don't get me wrong, because that's never going to be my style. I'm telling you this as an example of how to overcome the lack of time challenge. Okay, let's have a look at some more common obstacles and how to overcome them, and like the lack of time, as we just said. So with an obstacle like lack of time, the solution would be to prioritize your spiritual practice, identify and eliminate all of those time-wasting activities, and maybe use habit stacking so that you can integrate your practice into already existing routines. If the issue is that you might be losing motivation, maybe over time, I would say set small achievable goals and celebrate progress. You should reflect regularly on the benefits that you might be experiencing from your practice. And trust me, journaling is a great way of doing this. You might be feeling overwhelmed, and that usually is because we try to do too much. So start simple and small, and then gradually build your practice. It's better to be consistent with a few simple practices than to overwhelm yourself with too many at once. And I have been there as well. And I am one of those people that are like all or nothing. And what happens is you end up burning out and you end up very stressed because you're falling behind. And so you have to take a step back and decide that you're going to rebuild everything. And it's much easier to add things onto it than feel guilty because you have to remove them. Maybe the obstacle that you're encountering is that you get very easily distracted during practice. And in that case, creating a dedicated, distraction-free space for your practice would be the best idea. Of course, that's not always possible, so things like headphones if you need to block out some external noise, that always helps. Use tools like guided meditations, you can use timers to help stay focused, or even, do a meditation when everybody else has gone to sleep. Now, here's my favorite obstacle or challenge, and is feeling the need to practice perfectly. Accept that your practice is not gonna be perfect, or at least not every time. What matters is showing up consistently and being kind to yourself. There's no point in doing a spiritual practice if you end up hating yourself for it because you forgot to say a prayer before you lit up the candle. It doesn't matter. What matters is the intention. I have done it before, and I have done the whole ritual and created sacred circles and whatever. And then when I'm all set, I forgot that the candle is in a different room, and I realized that I didn't say the right words or whatever. And the only thing you can do is laugh. And as long as your heart is true and you are doing things with the right intentions, your spiritual practice is still going to grow and it's going to get better over time. Some more practical tips to help you with making a habit out of your spiritual practice, hopefully maybe even a daily routine. Things like setting reminders. So you can use alarms or notifications so that you don't forget about your practice time. I have an app to track different tasks over the day, and I have one basically for doing daily meditation and another one for journaling as well. Very, very important to keep track of your progress. If you listen to me for any amount of time, you know I am a big fan of journaling. I think it's an amazing practice and it definitely helps you keep track of progress. And I notice when I don't journal regularly, I do feel like my mind becomes much more cluttered and I start having some issues with anxiety, depression, self-confidence, and things like that. Keeping track of your progress is very important. And it doesn't have to be a full journaling, as in sitting down at your desk, writing paragraphs and paragraphs. You can even keep some sort of diary, even on a spreadsheet, just saying things like, did you meditate or did you do your spiritual practice ritual that day? How did it make you feel? What changes have you been feeling? How is your mood over the whole week? Things like that. Something that actually helps you identify the gaps when you're not doing your spiritual practice and how it affects your mood or whether you are doing too much and things like that. As I said earlier, being flexible, so you have to adjust your practice as needed to fit your life. Because remember, being consistent is much more important than doing it every single day, doing this amount of time. It is better to make sure that you can adapt to whatever is going on in your life rather than berate yourself because you couldn't do it that one day. And finally, remember, start small. So start with a manageable frequency and amount of time and then build from there. As usual, I've given you a lot of information so far, but what I'm going to do now is give you a couple of examples, maybe more than couple. It's a Spanish couple. We never really mean two. And you don't have to do all of this. It's like a pick and mix. For a morning routine, you could start with 5 minutes of guided meditation and then spend 2 minutes reciting positive affirmations and then write down 3 things that you're grateful for on your journal. And that sounds quite doable. If you prefer doing something in the evening, maybe you can spend 5 minutes writing about your day as some sort of reflective journaling. You can do some mindful reading, maybe reading a passage from a spiritual book or from an inspirational text, or maybe spend some time doing breathing exercises so that you can relax before bed. If you are interested in a nature-based practice, you could maybe practice walking meditation. So you can take a mindful walk in nature, focusing on your breath and your surroundings. You could maybe try outdoor yoga, practicing yoga in your garden or in a local park, or maybe even nature journaling. You can sit down somewhere and just write about your observations and feelings while you're in nature. Maybe even do some drawings about the things and the animals, the flowers that you see. Which brings me to the last example, which could be something like a creative practice. You could use artistic expression like painting or drawing as a form of meditation and self-expression. You can maybe play an instrument or listen to calming music as part of your practice, or maybe even engage in creative crafts that might bring you joy and mindfulness. And I am planning some content about using crafts as a spiritual practice and for well-being. So keep an eye out for that. I don't know if it's going to be a podcast episode, if it's going to be a written blog, or maybe I will do a video. I'm still considering it. Okay, I feel like I've been talking a long time. Let's recap very briefly what we've covered today. A daily spiritual practice, if you remember, is a personalized set of activities, and this will nurture your spiritual growth and will give you inner peace. It's about finding what resonates with you and making sure that you can incorporate it into your daily life. And remember that you can have meditation, prayer, journaling, physical movement. There are many elements of your practice, and they can be as unique as you are. Engaging in a daily spiritual practice can enhance your spiritual growth, can reduce stress, improve your relationships, and bring a greater sense of peace and purpose. And in order to get all of these benefits, it will be very helpful for you to set clear intentions, to choose practices that resonate with you, to create a sacred space, set a routine, and stay consistent. And always keep reflecting and adjust as you need it. Finally, make sure that you prioritize your practice, and you can use habit stacking, you can set reminders and track your progress. You might overcome obstacles by staying flexible and always be kind to yourself. I hope today's episode has given you the tools and inspiration to start or to refine your own daily spiritual practice. Remember, the most important thing is to create a practice that feels right for you and fits into your lifestyle. I love to hear about your experiences with daily spiritual practices. What works for you? What challenges have you faced? Please share your thoughts and questions for future episodes. Finally, don't forget to subscribe, rate, review the podcast. Please help me reach more people that might need all of this in their life. Stay tuned for our next episode. I am trying to get an episode or maybe 2 on shadow work, but it is quite a lot what I want to talk about. So I might not be ready with that content just yet. So keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, keep nurturing yourself and unleash your inner magic. Thank you so much for joining me today on Spiritcraft, and have a magical week.